Welcome once again to Fired Up. I'm your host for the show, Bob Irwin. We're coming to you live from the studios of Rigel here in Las Vegas, Nevada. This show is about guns, related politics, political issues that is, and self-defense. Fired Up is on our website, firedupwithbobirwin.com. A new show is posted every Thursday at around 5 p.m. Pacific time. New shows also appear on YouTube and numerous other media. The audio feed is rebroadcast for radio listeners Saturdays at noon on the Nevada Talk Network. You can find their stations at KELY1230.com. Questions or comments, you can send an email to bob@firedupmail.com or leave a message in my office recorder, which is 702-257-1060. If you leave contact information, I'll respond by email, text, or telephone. Questions for our guests will be forwarded to them, of course, directly, and I'll have them contact you. There are several hundred defensive uses of firearms every week in the United States, rarely covered by our left side media. So we always present a few for our listeners' education. Most of what we cover are good shootings. Some are questionable. Some are wrong. They're all educational for those of you that own firearms or carry a firearm on the street or carry one, leave one in your home for self-defense. Individual instances are generally adjudicated under local law. The advice might not apply to listeners in different jurisdictions. The incidents are as reported, except I always omit the names of the individuals involved. My guest today is firearm trainer Leonard V. Davis. Lenny, welcome to the show one more time.
Thank you, Bob. It's great to be here.
And would you give a little bit of your background?
I could do that. My name is Lenny Davis. I'm a retired special agent with Department of Homeland Security. I also am the owner of SRT Special Services. We are a private security, private investigations, and training firm here in Las Vegas. And we offer training in firearms and tactics for civilians all the way through military.
And been doing it for a long
Since 1980, I've been a certified firearms instructor.
My guest has a background that goes to hundreds of pages of experience in these issues. This is a security training sort of issue. For the Las Vegas Review-Journal, Fox TV5, and all the other local media, the British press even covered it. I pulled a story off of the BBC. The Las Vegas branch of a national security company is facing a wrongful death lawsuit after a resident died at the hands of guards employed by the company, or a guard employed by the company. The lawsuit started in January 2017, the death of a 57-year-old woman who was working at a Henderson, Nevada jewelry store when a security officer fired on an attempted robber but missed. His bullet struck the female employee in the chest. Reportedly, records identify the shooter as an officer hired in 2015, according to the records from the Private Investigators Licensing Board. He had been licensed as a security officer since 2007. The attorney for the family that's making this wrongful death suit said, "We are taking a close look at the training of the officer that shot and killed," I'll leave the name out, this lady, "by mistake," the attorney said, representing the estate. "There is absolutely no allegation that this act was intentional. It was a sad accident, but what we're focused on, did his company properly train him? Had he carried a gun? Was he familiar with the gun he used when he shot her?" Now, the officer is still licensed as a security officer, and state records still list him as an employee of the same company, but as an unarmed officer. The executive director of the Nevada Private Investigators Licensing Board, the regulatory guys for security officers, noted that the charge was not a result of disciplinary action. There is none in his file, no disciplinary action. Instead, it appears for unknown reasons his firearm certification simply lapsed and he did not requalify, so he's no longer required to, no longer qualified, I'm sorry, to carry a firearm. You have to recertify every so often. I think Lenny will be up to speed on that. Attorneys on all sides of this did not respond to requests for comments from media all over the place. This case is tentatively scheduled to go to trial in 2020 in Clark County, Nevada, here, District Court. Let me comment a little bit, and then we'll let my guest tear into this. The catch-all lawsuit, when police or security or CCW people are involved in a shooting, is always the failure to train properly lawsuit. It's easy to say shooters must watch the background in training or in court. In real life, dynamic motion and speed of a gunfight, it is all but impossible to clear the background, my opinion. It's even harder to avoid rounds missing the target and or ricocheting into a bystander. Only professionals with years of continued practice, think of SEAL teams there, Secret Service agents, can make accurate shots, particularly with handguns, in the midst of a real gunfight. Quite often we've seen reports that the victim was hit in the head when a realistic evaluation indicates the shot was a lucky or unlucky hit, not intentionally aimed at the head. How much training should be realistically required for police, security, CCW holders, or ordinary firearms owners if they want to start trying that? And that's probably coming up with our current Congress. We'll look at that. I'm going to turn the floor over to my security training expert. And
well, as you know, Bob, I'm not only a security license holder here in the state of Nevada, I'm also a certified firearms instructor for the state of Nevada for Private Investigating Licensing Board. I conduct the training class that the state mandates for security officers. The current training course is a whopping 13 hours minimum.
that's just for firearms.
That's just for firearms.
Yeah. Okay.
But that covers, that basically covers all of your use of force, your safe weapons handling, your basic firearms knowledge, and shooting. It is woefully, in my opinion, and it's strictly my opinion, it's woefully lacking. You and I were talking off camera about law enforcement, academies. Probably the minimum these days for a law enforcement academy for firearms training only is 80 hours. And that doesn't cover the laws of arrest, the use of force, the escalating ladder of force, when you can actually fire a weapon or use deadly force in an encounter. In this case, we have a rule that's called the 50% rule. You can be on the range where you're not getting shot at, and you're not going to get shot, and you can have a great group. Well, that group under stress is going to be at least 50% larger. So if you're a mediocre shot and you're putting rounds in, say, this size of a group in a body, you're going to shoot twice that when it comes to being under stress and being in a real gunfight. I've been in 2 real gunfights. I don't like it. Didn't like it then, didn't like it now. Don't ever want to be in another one. You are under the influence of your body produces about 94 different chemicals, and adrenaline being the big one, but there's all these endorphins and chemicals that your body produces when you're under stress. And it causes so many problems with your being able to do the finite skill of shooting a handgun. So it causes you not to be a super great shot. The people like Bob talked about, professionals, law enforcement, SWAT teams, military special operations people, Secret Service, those kind of agents. You end up doing a lot of training, a lot more training than the average person will do in a lifetime. Some of those people will do in a month or two. They become pretty much automatic when they shoot. But even those guys don't always put the rounds exactly where they're supposed to be. So you have this problem that I see in security. The state law right now says 13 hours. That is minimum 13 hours. 8 hours in classroom, minimum of 5 hours on range. And you too can be an armed security guard. I think that is just unconscionably not enough time. I've been asked to sit on a panel by the PILB, Private Investigator Licensing Board, to revamp the firearms program, which we're in the process of doing. In my own company at SRT Special Services, we don't do these kind of guards. We don't do anything uniform. Everything is plainclothes, executive protection types. Our minimum requirements are quarterly shoots. So our guys are out every quarter, like I did in law enforcement, Bob did in law enforcement. You do quarterly shoots to keep your standards up. You keep your shooting up. Well, we've gone above the what they call the standard of care. With our company, we felt that it's an investment in our company and our people to shoot more than what the state requires. The state requires a 30-round course to be shot twice a year. Every 6 months you have to qualify. Well, we do twice that just to make sure that our people stay at a level above that. This is a tragic accident. I guarantee you this officer didn't intend to shoot this woman. His training, I don't know. I'd have to look at his training records. I don't know how far back his training went. I don't know if he made all of his qualifications. I don't know what his qualification scores were. So those are all things that are going to get picked apart at a trial, because it's going to be the standard of care and is going to be really what the jury is going to consider. Did this company go far enough in the training of their people before they put them out? As Bob can attest, we've seen security companies nationwide that cut corners, and they cut corners. The first thing that they cut corners in is training, and that's where they, I tend to see. We would have to look at this, and I think it's going to come out in the court, is what this training record for this guy was. This guy, I feel sorry for him, because he went to work that day. He didn't intend to shoot anybody, and he certainly didn't intend to shoot an employee. It was just an accident, but it is going to be taken apart in the next months and years as the jury looks at this and courts look at this. And I think you're going to find that, they're going to really look at what was this man's training.
We could actually end up on opposite sides of this case. This is a very serious thing, and I don't intend to make light of it, but there is, in reality, no firearms training that's going to be complete enough to make everybody make good decisions in every encounter. It just can't happen. And what the state is looking at doing, what they did was provide a reasonable level of training. I agree with Lenny that it certainly could be more. When I was doing this program back in about the time this guy was first hired in 2007, we were training at my shop. We were training armed guards forever. I did almost 20,000, around 20,000 of them over a 4 or 5 year period. Part of that was caused by us being low cost. The other part of it was we were the only one in the state doing it for many of those years. The guards that, when we look at this and we look at how much training you're going to provide. We look at the reasonableness of him likely to be where he needs his gun. You know, how much driver training should somebody have to drive a car? 1,000 hours, given all the wrecks that we have now. So we're looking at what training is reasonable versus, and of course, all businesses are going to do on a cost plus basis. The PI board is looking at reasonable training. What they decided when I was doing it was 13 hours again, and it was about the same. It was mostly classroom. And basically we used to tell the students, you know, first we'd take them on the range and do the shooting part and qualify them and so forth with a little basic training in handling the gun. And then we'd take them in the classroom and for the next 5 hours tell them never use it. You know, you've learned how to shoot your gun. Try not to ever do that. It is there basically for your personal defense and all the rules of engagement and so forth. Lenny hit it on the head when he said nobody wins gunfights. I've heard that somewhere, I think from me, about 500 times doing this show. But what we're going for here with the lawsuit is the deep pockets, and the deep pockets are going to be the state of Nevada. It was their training program that they approved. I think this guy very likely took the class from me when he started this. Where I just said we're about the only people doing the teaching at the time. There is, where do you draw the line? I like to use the car comparison. How much driver training should a teenager have before we get behind the wheel? And we have set numbers of hours that's required and so on and so on. Does it work? The teenagers are still getting car wrecks at 3 times the rate of old folks. We go through the middle where we get in fewer wrecks, and when we get to be my age, then you get in more wrecks because you can't see where you're going. But I haven't yet. That's not an admission of guilt. It's a very difficult issue to determine, and this is going to end up in front of a jury with one side arguing that the training was reasonable given the circumstances, the other side arguing that there wasn't enough training, and all sides will agree there should be more training. I was debating once on a interview with our current district attorney, and who is involved a little bit in this case because he was the one that said it was an accident. It certainly wasn't intentional and so forth. So the criminal stuff went away, as it should have. We can all agree on that. But the DA we were talking about, had to do with gun laws and should people have training when they go to buy a firearm? Should we do a psychological check and various things like that? And we would save, it got down to that we can say some child had been hit by a driver who wasn't impaired, he just didn't see and didn't drive very well, and he passed the state test. And the idea was we're going to do more driver training for everybody. And I said, well, they should have 100 hours of driver training, and because far more people are killed accidentally in cars, obviously, than guns. I mean, it's about 100 to 1, something like that. Guns are really very small issue in accidental deaths. And I brought up the point, well, if we make the speed limit 15 miles an hour, we will save hundreds of children's lives every year. And the DA replied, but that would interfere with commerce. Because if we make it 15 miles an hour and nobody would ever get anywhere, all shipments would be late and so on and so on. Gas mileage would be up. I mean, obviously it was a facetious mark. I didn't expect him to lower the speed limit in Nevada to 15 miles an hour. But put that into firearms training. How much should they have and how much reasonably can be done? We certainly have the ability in there to take out the individuals who are incompetent, and we, as you probably have in the past, we fail them all the time. They can't handle a gun safely, they act unsafe in the range, and that's always been our policy. Once they act unsafe, show something unsafe, they're gone. And we end their police career or their security career as an armed guard or whatever. It's just a question, and it's hard to be fair to everybody. And a jury is going to get handed this at some point in time to say, was the training enough and was it thorough enough? And I will, Lenny will look at the training this guy had, and I will look at the training this guy had, and we may come up with opposite conclusions. But we will agree it should be more. One of the issues, I'm not sure, I have time to do this. One of the issues that came up while I was doing this was the Private Investigators Board came up with a new plan that the officers needed to fire part of their qualification prone. 6 rounds was all, and kneeling, I think 6 or 12 rounds, something like that.
Yeah, the current course does not have, the prone got thrown out. The current course does not have prone, but there is kneeling from both the 7 and the 15-yard line.
It's essentially the same. When we were looking at that, and I was talking to the PI board about this in one of their meetings, I asked how many guards that they had a record of had ever fired a shot prone in Nevada history, and certainly they keep track of all the shootings. And the board members, 2 of them responded, we have no record of any officer ever firing prone. Okay. Prone just doesn't really come up in security training. When would a guard be doing that? The kneeling, they did have 2 cases at the time, I believe. I'm not sure the second one fired. Maybe one shooting and one the guard kneeled. And in covering a 20-year period or something, they've been keeping records. That's probably too long, maybe 10 years. But they said, well, if you can't kneel, then they can't qualify. Then they can't be an armed guard. And now you had several hundred old retired guys who can't kneel because of bad knees, this, that, the other thing, and lost their $3 an hour extra that they got for being an armed guard, which made a lot of difference to them. That went so far as I recall watching a qualification at the North Las Vegas Police Range where that was being used by a guard company, and the instructor that was doing it had the people kneel, and they had to kneel unassisted, and they had to be able to keep their gun pointed at the target and stand back up again unassisted. Mm-hmm. And we're dealing with some 60-year-old ladies that were mildly overweight, to be charitable, and they simply could not get up unassisted. And there was a lawsuit over that one, and of course the court held that it would have been quite reasonable for the instructor, after the shooting part was over, to give her a hand getting out of that position.
And in fact,
let her stand up, and they did.
Yeah, and in fact, the PILB has changed the firearms policy or qualification that if you have a documented problem in getting, and kneeling, you can allow the student to use a stool and shoot from the sitting position.
So they're trying to take care of that.
Right.
But what I'm trying to say is, how far do we go in the training to make everything work where it's fair to all sides? It isn't going to be fair to all sides. It's going to be up to a jury. Hopefully it's going to be up to a settlement when they look at this, and the PI board will offer to revamp their training a little bit to cover this or that. It's, you look back at the family of the lady who was unfortunately killed, is, what are you going to do? Accidents do happen. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, in all phases of life, accidents happen where nobody really is at fault. It's just the circumstance. I don't know where I'm going with that further. You want to run back on that? And
yeah, I think, we look at, we've both been in the training business for a couple of days now. And I totally agree there needs to be a happy medium somewhere. You can't expect a security guard especially in this market, a uniformed security guard, if he's getting paid $12 or $13 an hour, in a lot of places, he's being very, very well paid. I know there are armed guards that are working in this town that are being paid much less than that, which I think is silly. But at that rate, even at $20 an hour, you can't expect a guy to go and undergo, say, 500 hours of training. But I think that 13, I've already been asked to like I said, to sit on this committee and revamp the firearms policy for the PILB. We look at surrounding states, and you have Arizona. Their minimum is 24 hours for firearms for an armed guard. Texas is 24 hours. I've even looked at a couple of states that have 40-hour programs. And then that's just strictly for a handgun. I've written, I have the only, right now in the state of Nevada, I have the only certified rifle program for security guards for the Private Investigation License Board. And there are only, I believe, 2 for shotgun. And in a lot of respects, majority of the security guards, armed security guards, aren't carrying rifles and shotguns up until just a couple of years ago. And now we have legal cannabis in this state. And there are several, and that is run by the qualifications that is run by the taxation department of the state of Nevada for security. It's not run by the Private Investigation Licensing Board. But we are seeing a lot more. My company has done some, been requested to do some operations that required us to issue rifles and shotguns to our people. Everybody goes through that class that carries that, and we're seeing a lot more of that being requested because of the cannabis industry, because these people are sitting guarding millions of dollars of cannabis and cash. And every month you see the Department of Taxation come out, and they come out with the previous month's sales records, and they're all over $40 to $50 million in gross sales. So the threat is there, and that's why those things are being addressed. Again, we've looked at other states, and our neighboring state in Arizona has got a pretty good program for 24 hours. And they have rifle and shotgun also, but those are programs on top of that 24 hours, and again require the qualifications at least every 6 months. So yeah, we're in total agreement, Bob, as far as where the line. There's got to be a reasonable line drawn in the sand about where we're going to go and what we're going to do on the training aspects of it, and we're going to probably have more training here in Nevada. It's going to be more than 13 hours. That's going to get kicked up, and I believe it should. Now, do I believe it should be? It'd be great if we could send a guy through 80 hours of firearms training like they do in a law enforcement academy, but that's just not feasible.
Interesting problem, and it will be settled. Hopefully, I can't imagine this case is actually going to go to court. I think it will be settled in some type of a settlement where they change the training a little bit, and they award the widow or the grandmother who passed away a little bit of money. They say that's not the reason they're suing. They're suing because they want to prevent future victims, and that may well be. I can't disparage what they're doing. I was going to say, as a sidelight, there's more training than that, because I was requested to do a class at community college many years ago because on firearms, because bail enforcement officers get licensed by the state. That is a totally different department, licensing them. And we did I put together a 15 or 18 hour program just for them. They already know about arrest law and use of force and posse comitatus and taking people across state lines, and they own the guy's body and all this stuff, who they can chain up and who they can't, and so on and so on. And most of them were ex-military or ex-police, but they wanted some basic firearms training, and we added in there, because so many of them did, a little bit of handgun training and shotgun training, because a lot of them carry shotguns, and if I was doing bail skip, I'd carry a shotgun too. And we went through the class, and they looked at it, and I think everybody passed. Maybe one or two guys dropped out for whatever reason. I don't recall kicking anybody out. And when we got to the end, the college looked at it and went, "Oh my God, we don't want to be teaching firearms. I mean, do you realize the liability?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I do, but you know." So they dropped that from at the time. They dropped that from their program, but we had yet another agency making up a firearms program and licensing people who are in real danger of getting into a gunfight. It's how Dog the Bounty Hunter, why he only carries pepper spray, because he can't have a gun, you know. Another whole story for another show. Anyway, we are running toward out of time. This will be a huge issue, and it'll give everybody some time to chew on. We're looking at, as I say, we're looking at a trial, if it goes there, in the end of 2020 sometime. And it'll be another firearms issue that's coming up in court right when we have the election.
Yeah.
Here we go. I would like to thank you for listening into this. This one is something that Lenny and I both have really great feelings about. You hate to see people lose their lives because of gun accidents, and that's something we both really dislike, gun accidents. You can check out our recent shows at firedupwithboberwin.com. It contains our last 18 or 20 shows now. The commercials keep us on the air. I don't think we ran any on this episode, but we'll be putting up some next week. We're going to have some stuff added to our show here that lists all of our supporters and friends and so forth, so you can shop where you see them advertised or mentioned on Fired Up. We are on the American Guns and Glory Network on YouTube. We are on YouTube as our own show, and on our website, of course, firedupwithboberwin.com. So please tune it in. Get our logo merchandise. We didn't do that this time. We had logo merchandise.
You should have me model that, because I have such a perfect head for modeling.
You think you get to keep it?
No,
It's
I know.
adjustable.
Yeah, I
It's a
know.
big
Thank
head.
God I've got it. Well, I have all these brains in there, so
We'll talk about that
it's
part after the
perfect.
show.
It's perfect.
Looks nice. It's for deer hunters and duck hunters, because deer don't see orange, and it works with state law. Plus, they're really cool looking. Anyway, you can find that stuff at our logo merchandise store, firedupwithboberwinstore.com. And we're on the talk radio, as I said, on Nevada on Saturdays at noon on the Nevada Talk Network. Thank you for supporting Fired Up. We will be back next week, and we've got this show will come up after the gun show. Never mind, I mentioned the gun show last week. We will see you again in another week. Thanks for listening.